Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Daybreak Europe podcast, available every morning on Apple, Spotify or wherever you listen. It's Thursday, the 26th of September in London. I'm Caroline Hepker. Coming up today, OpenAI discusses becoming a for-profit company and giving founder Sam Altman a sizable stake. Western allies and Arab powers propose a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hezbollah in a bid to avoid all-out war. Plus, walking a fine diplomatic line, Keir Starmer plans to meet Donald Trump today as global leaders hedge their bets on the next US president. Let's start with a roundup of our top stories. Bloomberg understands that OpenAI is discussing giving Sam Altman a 7% equity stake and becoming a for-profit business. The move would be a major shift for the firm behind ChatGPT, the first time its CEO would be granted ownership. Bloomberg's Annabelle Drewler says it's also an abrupt change for the AI firm.
Well, it certainly would be a bit of an about turn. I mean, Sam Altman is someone who in the past has really said that he didn't want to have any sort of equity stake in the company. He was telling people he already had enough money and that this was a company that was supposed to be benefiting society broadly. It does also speak to this bigger story that we've also been talking around as well, which is that OpenAI is looking at changing the structure of the business.
Our reporter Annabelle Drewler's there. Sources say the transition is still under discussion and a timeline has not been determined. The proposal comes amidst a raft of senior departures, including the Chief Technology Officer Mira Murati on Wednesday. In a statement, an OpenAI spokesperson said the business remains focused on building AI that benefits everyone. China is considering a $142 billion capital injection into its biggest state banks to help them support the country's struggling economy. Bloomberg has learnt that most of the funding will come from the issuance of a new special sovereign bond. But our China correspondent Min Lo says that the sector is not in crisis.
I don't think we should see it as the banks being distressed, because if you look at the capital adequacy ratio, it is for the big banks still well above the requirement of 8.5%. The average now is about 11.7%. So this is really to support these banks at a time when their profit margins has been hit. It's at about 1.5% as of end June, which is significantly below that threshold of 1.8% that is deemed to be reasonable profits.
Bloomberg's Min Lo speaking there. The move is part of a broader economic stimulus package that we've seen unveiled this week, which included reductions to mortgage and key policy interest rates. Though the details are yet to be finalised and they are subject to change, the action would be the first time that Beijing has injected capital into its big banks since the 2008 global financial crisis. The US, Arab powers and all other members of the G7 have proposed a 3-week ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. It is a bid to avert all-out war after days of Israeli airstrikes on Lebanon, where Hezbollah is embedded. Lebanon's Economy and Trade Minister Amin Salam told Bloomberg there is not much time left.
The next 24 hours would be very critical because we are at a very serious turning point. If a ceasefire is to be accomplished now, we would really have helped Lebanon, we would have helped the region and avoided a full-scale war that is very, very close to happen, in the few hours and few days ahead of us.
Lebanon's Trade and Economy Minister Amin Salam speaking there. He adds that he has spoken to Hezbollah and that the group recognised the need to avoid escalation. Israel's UN envoy told the Security Council that his country did not seek a full-scale war. Donald Trump has lashed out at Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky for criticising him. The Ukrainian president has questioned Trump's pledges to negotiate a quick end to the war in Ukraine if elected. Trump did not take the comment well.
The president of Ukraine is in our country, and he's making little nasty aspersions toward your favorite president, me. But take a look at the war happening right now in Ukraine. It would have never happened if I were president, to start off with. A deal could have been made if we had a competent president instead of a president that egged it all on. And Biden and Kamala allowed this to happen by feeding Zelensky money and munitions like no country has ever seen before. Every time he came to our country, he'd walk away with $60 billion. He's probably the greatest salesman on earth.
The Republican presidential nominee also said that he has no plans to meet the Ukrainian leader. One person Donald Trump will be meeting is the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. The British leader hopes to build relations with both presidential nominees and global business trips on his trip to the US. The meetings come as more economic gauges are showing the UK government's narrative around a tough budget to come is shaking confidence. The British Retail Consortium says that belief in the strength of the economy fell by 13 points in August. In contrast to the gloom, though, the OECD upgraded Britain's growth forecast for the next 2 years by more than any other G7 nation. The organisation's chief economist, Alvaro Pereira, says that's because of the government's missions.
The emphasis on growth is key, and the emphasis on reform is key. In fact, what we're saying around the world, not only for the UK, but around the world, is that now that we are turning the corner on inflation, it's time to turn the corner on fiscal. That means to go to fiscally prudent policies, and also on reforms. In what we've heard in terms of growth, I think makes sense.
So that was the OECD's Alvaro Pereira speaking there. The Economist also welcomed reports that the UK Chancellor plans to upgrade her fiscal framework to allow more investment. And Qantas Airways ghost flight scandal misled almost 1 million customers booked on tens of thousands of non-existent services. The revelation comes from court documents that show the scale of the misconduct and the airline's awareness of the problem. Qantas settled the lawsuit last year, agreeing to pay 120 million Australian dollars in fines and compensation for selling tickets on flights that it had already decided to cancel. The bombshell allegations led to the premature departure of the chief executive, Alan Joyce, last year, but it wasn't clear at the time how much Qantas knew about its own ticketing deficiencies. In a moment, we're going to bring you more on the last-ditch ceasefire proposals being pushed for Israel and Hezbollah, and also on the ChatGPT creator OpenAI. The story there, it's been going through something of an existential crisis. What is this metamorphosis going to look like? We'll bring in our tech reporter Vlad Savov. But first, there's another story on the terminal that I thought was worth a couple of moments of your time. In the UK, if you're looking for a new role, expect to see more job salaries. About half of UK firms said that they will add paid data to listings when they are advertising a job. This according to a survey from Mercer International. Apparently 48% of businesses said that they'll include pay data in listings in the next 2 years. That's basically more than double what they're doing at the moment. Why, you ask? Pay transparency apparently is gaining momentum. The UK doesn't have rules around this, but the EU and some US states do. So a lot of companies now apparently are taking on the idea of having a global policy about pay information. And so maybe that will benefit employees if you see it that way here in the UK. It's a nice story. It's on the Bloomberg terminal for you this morning. Now, the company behind ChatGPT is discussing giving CEO Sam Altman a 7% equity stake. OpenAI is looking at restructuring into a for-profit business. It comes after significant upheaval and an exodus of senior leaders. Joining me now to discuss is Bloomberg's tech editor, Vlad Savov. Vlad, good morning. OpenAI has been having something of an existential crisis. What is the plan now under discussion in terms of the evolution?
Well, it has been a very tumultuous year, starting with November last year. It was a very quiet time as far as tech news was going in 2023. And then we had the whole explosion of news around OpenAI, with Sam Altman first losing the CEO position and then regaining it. In the interim, the person who took over as interim CEO was Mira Murati, and she's the chief technology officer of the company, or will be until the time that a suitable successor is found for her, because she just announced that she's leaving. She's the latest high-profile departure. So indeed, over the past year, OpenAI has been doing a whole bunch of restructuring, reorganizing, and figuring out its own mission. one of the things that Sam Altman himself said in a message that he shared with the world on X and to the company is that they will have an all-hands meeting on Thursday in the US, and they'll talk more with both staff and everyone involved, and just to let them know what the strategy is. So I can't answer your question, but hopefully after Thursday, OpenAI itself will give us more clarity.
Okay, what does it mean then for the future of OpenAI and ChatGPT?
Well, the conflict last year that pushed Sam Altman out in the first place had a lot to do with a couple of factions within the company. One was very much concerned with doing responsible, safe, for the benefit of all humanity kind of AI development, which is probably much slower as far as pacing goes than Sam Altman liked. And it seems like he is the one who has won out. Several people, Ilya Sutskever is one of the key tech people. He left over the course of the past year, alongside Mira Murati, the chief of research, and a vice president in charge of research, have also announced that they're leaving. So it very much seems like the company is aligning entirely behind Sam Altman and his vision, and that is a much more commercial one. When you look at also some of the news and reports that have happened over the recent months, you can see OpenAI partnering with Apple to distribute its technology on the iPhone. It already has a close relationship with Microsoft. It seems like he's very much pushing toward turning this into a much more conventional commercial tech company.
Yeah, indeed. Lastly, I mean, speaking of tech, AI functionality needs more memory chips, and so Micron has reported strong earnings. Just a brief line on that.
Yeah, I mean, Micron outperformed the expectations for the current quarter as far as its forecast went, and the result of that has been an upsurge across the entire semi-industry here in Asia. Most notably, SK Hynix, the leader in providing HBM memory chips for the likes of NVIDIA's AI accelerators, that's up pretty well. So it does seem to show that the demand for that technology is not dissipating anytime soon.
No, Vlad, absolutely. Thank you for being with me. Now, to Lebanon and an urgent effort by the US, Europe and Arab countries to avert an all-out war and a potential ground invasion by Israel against Hezbollah in Lebanon. Joining me now to discuss is Bloomberg's EMEA News Director, Roslyn Matheson. Good morning, Ros. The proposal is a 3-week ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah that would then open the door for a wider negotiation, ceasefire hostage. What are the details here?
Well, that's basically it in terms of the details that we have so far. What seems to be on the table, as you say, is the Arab allies, the US, Europe are saying if you agree to a 3-week ceasefire, hopefully that gives us enough space to work out how to have a conversation and how to talk about a pathway to stop the fighting and certainly to stop it from escalating into that all-out war that people are very worried about. So the starting point seems to be just agree to halt the rocket fire that's been going on, the missile strikes have been going on, and then allow people to sit down somewhere at the table. We do know from our interview with the Lebanese economy minister this morning that he says that Hezbollah is at least open to the idea, but there's no word from Israel so far. And without a lot of details, it's a bit hard to know what the reception is going to be. But that just shows just how complicated it is. You can't really go in with a proposal for how to stop this fighting. All you can do so far is say, let's just stop fighting and talk and see if we can find a way through. Yeah.
So how much hope is there that this diverts the possibility of a ground invasion by Israel?
Well, it's very clear that Israel wants very much to avoid a ground invasion if they can. History shows us what that can lead to, but they have an overarching goal, which is to degrade Hezbollah and to push Hezbollah back from the border. And they're doing that mostly, as we can see right now, through rocket attacks, missile strikes, targeted strikes on Hezbollah officials and so on. So if that goal is still there, and it's very clear that they're determined on that front, at some point, do they have to send troops in to achieve it? Very much they don't want to, that's clear. But they are moving significant numbers of troops to the northern areas of Israel. They're calling up reservist troops again and sending them in. So certainly they're massing troops in the area just in case they need to use them.
OK, just lastly, what might we hear today? What might be the developments? The US has some hopes?
Well, it's interesting because, of course, Benjamin Netanyahu is going to the US or in the US for the UN General Assembly meeting. So interesting to see what happens on the sidelines of that. And quite possibly he doesn't want anything to be escalating while he's out of the country. But we haven't had any kind of response from Israel so far to this proposal for a ceasefire. We're hearing slightly positive noises from Hezbollah, but nothing from Israel. And really, it will be to a large extent up to Israel to decide, because most of the rocket attacks of late have come from Israel. So it's really going to be interesting to see whether they're amenable, and certainly what Netanyahu has to say today when he's in the US.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, your morning brief on the stories making news from London to Wall Street and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed every morning on Apple, Spotify and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning on London DAB Radio, the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.